except for you. So there are 2 Sundays a rector of a church usually tries to get out of preaching. Can you name the first one? Trinity Sunday. And I can tell you, most of my 20-some odd years, I've avoided it. And the other is Transfiguration, because this Transfiguration thing is an interesting and strange experience, and the scholars are talking about how it connects to the law and the prophets and all this kind of stuff, but it's not easy to preach. And even though I did some research, I had to call Laura from Guam. Well, I didn't call her, I emailed her. I said, give me some insights into the Transfiguration. And she actually gave me a lot. So I asked her just this morning if she would just share some of your initial thoughts about the Transfiguration. That's the gospel reading, by the way.
Well, actually, I just had another little insight while we were singing our hymn, our gospel hymn, where in the 3rd verse, the hymn says, they lived not only in ages past, there are hundreds of thousands still. And I just thought, we hear about Moses' face glowing and hear about Jesus' transfiguration, where he becomes this glowing being. And for me, the hymn ties it to our present, which is we're still living in the presence of the divine, and we're being transfigured by God. Either because of some powerful force working upon us through God, or because of God in us, Christ in us, coming out to other people. And so I guess my insight this morning is that these transfigurations are still happening, even if they're not quite as dramatic as glowing and talking to people who believe we're long dead.
Thank you. I'm going to preach on the letter of Peter. And I just decided that this morning too. You will do well to be attentive to this, as to a lamp shining in a dark place, until the day dawns and the morning star rises in your hearts. The morning stars is another word for Jesus as well. Thinking about Jesus in our hearts. Another thing I participated in while I was in Guam was EFM. Maureen and I had just finished touring the Arizona Memorial in Pearl Harbor, because we stayed there coming and going. And then I called in to Nancy and Walt and the crew for EFM, and they were talking about piety. What is piety? What is pious behavior? Any responses to that? What do you think of, when you think of piety, what do you think about?
Righteousness.
What's that?
Righteousness.
Righteousness.
Holiness.
Holiness.
Without sin.
Without sin. Well, I guess none of us are pious then.
We try.
We try. We try. Anything else come to your mind when I say live a pious life? What would be living a pious life? In a monastery. I guess I'm not going to be pious. Man, I'm striking out. Be humble. Pious is being humble. Serving others. A close relationship with God. Thank you, Miss EFM herself. Because for me, that's the beginning and end of piety. Letting that morning star be born in your heart, rise in your heart. And the image that came to me when we were talking piety, there are some denominations that talk about the path to holiness, that we're all on a journey of holiness and piety. And on the way, we might have some of these transformative spiritual experiences. But the image that came to me as I stood there in the grass at Pearl Harbor was the image from the movie Saving Private Ryan. How many people have seen that movie? Well, for those of you who have not, one of the secretaries that was writing letters to parents of deceased realized that several siblings had died, and there was one more in the war, Private Ryan. And so, in light of what happened to the Sullivan brothers on the Navy ship, they wanted to send a group of men in to rescue Private Ryan and bring him out of the war because they didn't want his parents to lose all of their children. And in the process, everyone on that squad is killed. But near the end of the movie, when the Tom Hanks character is killed, or he's dying, the Private Ryan comes up to him and what Tom Hanks says, live. Whatever you do, live. With the sacrifice that all of them made. And the final scene, as I remember it, is 40 years later, and the grandfather age Private Ryan is at Normandy, standing in front of the cemetery and asking, did I live a life worthy of your sacrifice? I think that's the question that we can ask Jesus. When you talk about a pious life, think about asking that question now. Jesus, am I living a life worthy of the sacrifice you made for all of us and for me? If you want to know what a pious life is, live it in light of what God has done for you and for me. Every day, every moment, in the present, as Laura said. Jesus, have I lived my life worthy of the sacrifice you made for me? And I can tell you, for me, the answer would be, no, I haven't. No, I haven't. I have not lived that pious life that's worthy of the sacrifice of Jesus. But the good news is, Jesus' answer to my question is yes. You are worth my sacrifice. Each and every one of us is worth the sacrifice that Jesus has made for us. That's piety. And we're getting ready to bring another child of God into that pious relationship with Jesus. We're getting ready to invite him to live with that question the rest of his life, knowing the answer is yes, you are worth my sacrifice. So Brian and Clint, if you will please come forward, we will begin this service of baptism as Emma runs to get the children and bring them down in time for